Greetings everybody, my name is Jabakish and welcome to my new video tutorial about unit converter widget. At work I had to write a widget which converts length, mass, temperature and other units from metric to imperial or vice versa, and I was wondering how I would approach it, and basically the way I did it was I used a Node.js unit converter project that's already proven to be to work, and I converted that to an Xpage application using jQuery and Bootstrap for styling. Now, before I go any further, I would like to give a big thanks to Prominic.net because they graciously host my Domino Xpage applications on their servers, and particularly I would like to thank Joey Kennedy and Stephen Beagles because they were first class to help me setting up the Domino the way I wanted. So let's see how the application works. You can see I have three converters: length, volume and temperature on this page right now, and if I enter any value into these input fields, the converter immediately changes the inch value to a foot value, or if I want to change it to millimeters here, and I say, I don't know, I want a foot here, so 8 foot is 2438 millimeters. The same thing the volumes, so as soon as I enter anything into the input field box, jQuery detects that and invokes the function that converts it. For example, 0C is equals to 32 Fahrenheit. So let's see how I add another widget to it, let's say a mass converter. So let's go to designer and see how the page looks like. So you see here I have three divs here, which has the width of 4 bootstrap values. So let's add another div here under it, and we want a mass converter. So I just write here mass, and I'm using, instead of temperature, I use mass, and let's say I want to go from kilogram to pounds. So I save it, go back to Chrome, I refresh the page, and now you see I already have a mass converter here, and 1 kilogram equals to 2.2 pounds, and you can see I can change it to whichever units I have programmed in it. So this is the application, and now let's see how I went about and did it. So first I searched the npm repository, and I wanted to look for unit converters, and I found a good one which is written by Ben NG, and it's called convert units, and you can find it on GitHub. Now let's see how the actual function works. It's a chained function, so you can see here this is exactly how my application works as well. So you say that you take a number value, convert 1, and then you take the two units, the from unit and the to unit. So if you convert 1 liter to milliliters, you get 1000 back. The same way, if you want from imperial to metric units, you say convert 1 from pound to kilogram, and you get 0.4536. So that sounds perfect, and let's see how Ben made this work. So I basically cloned this GitHub project and saw what's in it and how it works. So this is the actual Node.js project, and the first thing you do when you look at a Node.js is the package.json file. In the package.json file you see what dependencies does it have. So if it's very complicated, obviously you don't want to do it. But if you look at the dependencies of this application, it's very simple. All it uses is actually Lodash, which is a very common library, just like jQuery. Lodash is helping with you with loopings and other things on the client side. So I said, okay, fine, that's not a big deal. I can use Lodash, it's very simple. Now let's see how the application actually works. So if you look in the lib, you can see that you have the definitions, which when you look at it, you have actually many different definitions. If you look in the Node.js project, you see that he provides you with conversions of length, area, mass, volume, and all these different things. I actually only use 4 of them: the length, the volume, the mass, and the temperature. But if you need other units, you can actually use others, and you can extend it as well. So when you look in the lib and the definitions, these are all the different units that it converts. Okay, but the most important thing is obviously the index.js file, and that's where the magic happens. That's where the function is defined. Let's close the, I don't need this output. So when you look in this index.js file, you can see that it requires Lodash. Well, he actually separates Lodash into keys and each because he only used these two functions. And also it requires all the different units. And then you have the actual function, which is not that big. It's only a few hundred lines. And this is the converter. So the challenge was, how do I make this into an Xpage application? Now let's look in the designer how I did it. I have a few custom controls, a few script files, and a single Xpage. So on the index Xpage, all I have is the custom controls and some required scripts. Now if you look in the custom controls, all these A, I, Li tag and UL, these are the HTML5 tags, and then if you're interested how I do this, I have another video, and if you click on the top right corner, you can see how I made these HTML5 tags. But the important part for this application is the CC unit converter, which is the actual bootstrap, the custom control that I use on the index page. And in the script libraries, if you see, I have 4 scripts: app, measures, measures.js, unit converter.js. Now if you look in the index Xpage, as I said, I have a few script files. Let me reformat it so you can see the colors. So I see that I require the measures.js. It's a server-side script file. I will show you what I put in it. Basically that's where I have all the different units I want to convert from. I require the Lodash, which I use just the CDM for it. The unit converter.js is the actual function that performs the unit conversion. The measures.js is actually exactly the same file as the measures.jss. I just wanted to have the units available on the client side as well and on the server side. And I have an app.css just for a little CSS files. And the app.js itself is just the jQuery listener that listens for the changes in the input boxes and in the combo boxes. And all in all you have here is the unit converter. And if you look in it, I have 4 what is it called, property definitions: title, the units, the default from, and then default to. I mean, the title, default from, and default to are pretty obvious. So this is just on the top. When in the legend, if I say length here, you can see that here it writes length. And if I go back, and also this is the from default unit, and this is the to default unit. So whenever you load the page, it defaults to those 2 values. That's pretty straightforward. And this units is basically defines which kind of conversion you want to perform. Length, I have volume, temperature, and mass. Probably the most complicated part of this project coming from Node.js into Xpage applications was to create this measures JavaScript object, because I wanted to use it exactly the way it is used in the Node.js project, so I don't have to change the actual converter code. And let me show you how I did this. So if I look in the Node.js applications, you can see that Ben created a measures object, and this measures object contains all the various units like length, area, mass, volume. Now if I look in the, for example, let's just look in the length.js. In the length.js, what you have is a metric part and imperial part. So you can see the metric is here, the imperial part is here, and also he also has the underscore anchors. So it's going from metric to imperial. So I wanted to recreate the same way the JavaScript object as he uses in the code. So if you look at my measures.js file, which looks like this here, I also defined a measures variable, which is a global variable, and it is nothing but a JavaScript object. And this object contains, I didn't separate them with length and volume and mass, but I include all the different units into this one file. So I just recreated it the same way as he did. So I can call measures.length and .metric the same way that he does in the index.js. He comes measures.length, and whatever it is in the length file, you have the metric and all the other things. So if you look in the measure.js file again, I have length, mass, volume, temperature, and I have also the metric, imperial, and the underscore anchors. And if I open these up, for example, length metric, I get exactly the same thing. I just copy paste it from the length.js. If I open my metric, it has the millimeters and it has all the different properties as well. And the interesting thing is there's two anchor. So I mean, it's very cleverly done. So whatever you do always when you convert from one unit to another, first you convert the unit to an anchor. Then if it's between metric and imperial, you go from the metric anchor to the imperial anchor, and then go back to the desired unit. So this anchor conversion makes the unit converter very extensible. So for example, I want to add micrometer to my metric units in the length. So all I do is just copy this millimeter part, this whole object, and let's just copy paste it on the top of it. And I say it's micrometer, so usually we use U to denote micro, and the singular of it is micrometer, and it's micrometers. And to the anchor, obviously you go 1,000 down, so it's 1 million. 1 to 1,000, 1, 2, 3, 1 to a million. And now you basically extended your unit conversion to micrometers as well, and it will work with all the different metric and imperial units. Now, the only tricky part was to add the anchors to the my measures.js file. So if I collapse now my metric units and imperial units, the way Ben created it is that he didn't add the anchors as just a normal variable, but he added into the module exports variable here. So in order to make this work with the Xpages, all I did was copied these anchors, and if I go back to my measure.js files, you can see that I just pasted right under the imperial. And this way you access the underscore anchors property of the length object the same way as in the Node.js applications. So you can see that in all the different units, length, mass, volume, and temperature, we have metric units, imperial units, and the anchors. Metric units, imperial units, and anchors. And if you want to extend to other measurements, let's say, I don't know, speed, then you just create the same way that I created the temperature object. You create a new one which called speed, and then you will have a metric object, an imperial object, and an underscore anchors object, if I can type. And if you go back to the project, you can see there's the speed.js file, and I copy my metric units, go back to my measures, Control V, go to the imperial units, and I have all the different speed units, measures, imperial units. And on the bottom again we have the anchors, and we take the anchor conversion, Ctrl C, go back to the measures, and I put it into the anchors. And now that's it. I have now speed available in my application if I wanted to. So that's how I created the measures.js file. So let's see how we use these JavaScript files in the Xpage applications. Let's open the custom control unit comb custom control and look in the property definitions. You see we have 4 of them. 3 of these 4 are just simple strings. The title gives you the title of this custom control. Right here it says legend JavaScript composite data title. So if you have a length converter widget, then you can say length. And if you look at the other ones, the default from and default to are just convenience for you. Whenever you load the page, you can set default values of the combo boxes to these 2 units. The interesting part of it is the units property definition, which is a special JavaScript object. So in order to define this, I actually type the type. I don't select it from the combo box available combo boxes but I write com.ibm.jscript.std.object. This is how I provide a JavaScript object to a custom control. Now, when I call it from the index page, you see, I define it by measures.length. This is obviously for a length converter. For a volume converter, I supply it with a measures.volume. So if I go back to my measures file, what I do is basically I take measures and length. So I take all the properties of this length and provide it to the custom control. You see, so in the length we will have the metric units, the imperial units, and the anchors. And all the way, if I have mass, the same way I provide the metric, imperial, and anchors. So that's what I provide into the custom control. Now in the custom control, I have to do something with this JavaScript object. So let's look in it. And the way I use it is basically I just calculate the values of the combo boxes using this JavaScript object. If you go back to the application, you can see that all these values here are dynamically calculated using the measure.js file. So if it's a volume converter, you have all the different volume values. Now this is convenience, you can do it by hand, but I just found it very convenient to do it this way, because then all I have to do is just supply that JavaScript object and it's dynamically calculated when the Xpage is created. Now how is it done? So if I go back to my Xpages, you see that when I supply this units object, I have a combo box here. This is the combo box, and the values of this combo box is calculated using a JavaScript code. Let's look at that code. So what I supply is, when I call this custom control, is the composite data.units, which is a JavaScript object. But in this JavaScript object, you actually have 3 other objects. One is the metric unit object, and the other is the imperial unit object. So the way I call them or define these variables is calling the property of metric of the measure object and the imperial property of the measure object. If I go back to my measure.js, what you see here is that, so if it's a length, its metric property will give you all the metric units. So millimeter, centimeter, meter, kilometer. The imperial property will give you the inch, yard, foot, and miles. So let's look at the code again. So what I do here is just take these metric units and loop through with a for loop to get all the different millimeter, centimeter, kilometer, whatever. And then between the metric and the imperial units, I just add these dashes just so it looks nice. And then I loop through all the different imperial units, and then I return this array. So whenever this combo box is created, you can see in the Xpage or in the browser that you have all the metric units, you have the dash 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 to separate, and the imperial units. The same way with the mass, you have the metric units, dash dash dash, and the imperial units. So basically that's all I use the JavaScript file, the server-side JavaScript file, to create these combo boxes. If you look at the combo boxes again, I also have default value, and you can see that the default value comes from the default from property of the custom control, and also have the other combo box, which is right here, and that combo box default value is the default to value. Now let's talk about how I handle the changes in the input fields or in the combo boxes. I use event listener delegation. What it means is that I'm not listening to the individual boxes. So for example, if you look in the page, I have 4 widgets here. and if I change the value of the length, you can see that only the value in the converted field next to the length changes. If I change the mass, again, only the field next to it changes. If I change the combo box here, it only changes the value in the mass converted field, not in the length and the volume. Now the way I handle this is called event delegation. I'm using classes on these input field, this combo box, and this combo box. They all have a class. If I look and inspect it, you can see that this input field has a class called input field. The combo box has, the from combo box has a, right here, from unit class field, and the to combo box has the to unit class name. So if I go back again to the Xpages, you can see that I defined it here for the combo box. For the to unit is here, stylecast to unit, and the where is it? Here it is. And the combo was for from unit. You have the from unit, and the input field has a stylecast of input field. Now all these changes obviously are handled in the client side, so that's why I have this little file called app.js. Now here is the listener that I'm talking about. I only listen to events on the from unit class, the to unit class, and the input field class. And I'm using a listener called input. So I'm not using key press or changes or any other things. Input is very good for when users enter input into a field or change a combo box value. Since there's only a single listener on the page, I have to find out which is the actual combo box or the actual input field box that has been changed. And in order to use this, we use the this object in JavaScript. Now the way that's how you find it, that's exactly the input box that you changed. So from that information you can find out which of the combo boxes belong to that widget. So the way I do this is basically simple. So if I click on this input field, let's say that's in input field has been changed, the way I find the locations of and the values of these combo boxes and this combo boxes is basically going up the DOM tree and find the closest row, which is the class of row. So this will define for me, this you see that the blue rectangle defines my widget, and from that I can go down and find my class, which is the from unit. So and then the same way I go up to the row and go to the closest to unit. So this is the logic I'm using in jQuery to find which are the actual fields that I need to listen when I change the value of the length input field. So let's just go back to the code and see how I did it. So I know that something happened and I get this value, and then what is the converted field is this closest row that basically goes upwards in the DOM tree and find the closest row class, and then now I'm going down in the DOM tree and find the closest conv field, which is the conv field. Actually I didn't mention that the conv field is this class. It also has a field called converted field. I mean, that's obvious. Okay, so this is how I find my actual conv field that I need to change. If I change the value in the length, I have to change the value of this conv field, not that one. I hope I make it clear. So that's how I find my converted field, and I again submit this $this value into my change unit function, and then change the values. So again, I have to find out which was the set value of the input box, which was the from unit value, and which is the to unit value. And again, you can see the logic here. I supplied the $this variable. I'm going up the DOM tree, finding my closest row, so I know that I'm in my own little widget, and then find the first input field, and I get the value of it. And that the same way I find the from unit and I find the to unit. Now I just set here an if statement. If there's no set value, so if the value here, if I delete the values here, you can see that it just goes back to 0. If I also change this to dash dash dash, it won't convert anything because that doesn't make any sense. So this is handled by this if statement. If there's no set value, or the from unit equals dash dash dash, or the to unit equals dash dash dash, just return this. Return, there's a space here, return nothing. Otherwise, let's take all these values and use the convert function, put in the value that we just received, then the from unit and the to unit, and return that number into that field. And then we set the value of the converted field of the same widget with this number. Now the only thing we haven't talked about is actually where does the convert function come from. Now this comes from the Node.js project, and I took the converter object from that Node.js project and put it into a JavaScript file called unit converter, and here is the actual code that comes from the Node.js project, and let me show you what I did. So let's go back to the Node.js project and open up the index.js file. That's where all the magic happens. So we already went through the measures part of the index.js part, the file, and then you also have on the top the how the Lodash is used in the project. I will come back to it in a moment. So all the things happened in this converter class. So when I created the converter unit JS file, I just took everything from down here, convert.js, the converter class, except the module exports equals convert, because we don't need that. And I just say Ctrl C, and then in Domino Designer I just say let's make a new library, and I say unit converter to the JS, just to show you how I did it. I made this file and paste everything in there. Now the only difference is that in the Node.js project, if I go back to the top and look at the Lodash, the keys function of the Lodash library is used in the Node.js project by using the keys keyword, and the for each Lodash function is used using the each keyword. That doesn't work for us. Usually when we use Lodash, the way we do it is, let's just show you, Lodash is defined by an underscore dot, and then we use the functions like say keys and then whatever comes in it. So what I have to do is look for all the appearances of each. Let's see where we find it. You see there is one. That's the Lodash for each function, and I have to replace with all of that with underscore dot for each not for each, and the opening curly parentheses, and I say just replace all, and you see that we had 12 of these. Now let's go home again and do the same thing with the keys. So keys has to be replaced with underscore dot keys. Oh, come on. There you go. Replace all, and we had 4 of these. So that's what you have to do in order to make Lodash work in the project. So whenever I use this unit converter JS file, let's go back to my index. All I have to do is add as resources to my index page. So if you look in my resources, in this index page, I said resources. Come on. I have the measures JSS file. I have the Lodash coming from a CDN, lodash.min.js. I have the unit converter client-side JavaScript file, the measures JavaScript file, and the app.js, which is just my listener of the events in jQuery. And I believe I explained everything I wanted in this application. The code itself is available on my GitHub repo. You can look for the link under this video or at my blog xpageexplorer.org. Thank you for your attention and hope to see you soon.